Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great weekend thus far. Regardless whether you're in trucking or you're just seeing this type of video for the first time, whether you're in logistics, whatever the case may be. Someone asked me just to kind of go down a rundown quickly of what are the major factors or factors in regards to what's happening currently in the logistics industry, specifically trucking and the trucking rates that we're seeing. I did a similar video, at the beginning of last year. Not exactly the beginning, but like March of 2023, where we still saw rates shaky to say the best. But currently, we're seeing much of the same. There's a lot of kind of finger pointing going around in terms of who is to blame for this. I think there's definitely a shared responsibility in what's happening right now with the rates. Not only are we seeing rates at historical lows on on some specific lanes, but also we're seeing lows across the board for the standard lanes that people run all the time, right? So even those lanes are, they're not always, four, five, $6, $7 a mile. Even the regular lanes where we're always seeing $2 a mile, even those are like diminished to $1 a mile, So it's sad to see, primarily because of the North American trucker, right? Both USA and Canada. We're seeing a lot of rates that have been a lot of drivers that have been affected by this tremendously. I get drivers asking me every single week, when do you see us coming out of this? A lot of them have shuttered their operations in terms of their own businesses and joined on as, company drivers for the bigger mega carriers, right? So, who is to blame for all this? I mean, sure, we can do the finger pointing today. I'd like to say that it's definitely a mix of mega carriers, both big, small, and medium-sized brokers, and the small carriers and medium carriers that don't exactly know how to price out shipments for their customers that they're asked for, right? Um, you know, I think that it would be fantastic if people took a little bit of a break, looked at their operational costs, and realize that $1 a mile isn't going to get you through the tough times. Okay. Now, I understand the argument can be made. Not everybody's operating costs are the same, right? Not everybody, needs $5 a mile to run down the road, right? But at the same time, you shouldn't be settling for $1 a mile. Okay. You should not, that should not be something that's in your book at all to be talking about. Okay. There's a gentleman out there that's creating a backhaul system, a system where you can find the cheap, heavy loads, right? Um, and we shouldn't be participating in things like that. Okay, as truck drivers, as carriers, as trucking company owners, we should not be promoting that and elevating that. Instead, we should be focusing on building direct relationships with shippers or building very strong uh, business related relationships with brokers where you explain to them, this is what it's going to take for me to go from point A to point B. Okay. This is the rate I need. These are my reasons that I need it. This is a rundown of what my costs are. Okay. And in order for us to service this lane, this is where we would need to be at. Now, I welcome competition. It's fine. Plus or minus a couple cents is fine. But when we're talking a dollar difference between a carrier, two, three, four, five, 50 carriers, a dollar and a half, $2 difference between the highest, realistically highest priced carrier and unrealistically the lowest priced carrier, that's a problem. There should not be that big of a gap between the prices between the guy that's running relatively lean in terms of price and the guy that's running to make a little bit more of a profit. Okay, there should be tighter margins between those two. Okay, disparity between those two. Okay. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing guys take loads for 80 cents a mile. Are you joking me? That's going to ruin the industry. That's going to ruin the industry. On top of all that, of course, operating costs, fuel expenses, all that stuff, everything has increased, right? We got inflationary pressures from the economy itself, from our countries here in North America. Okay, our governments aren't helping. Of course, they're not helping at all. We've seen all-time high interest rates going through the roof in a lot of places. Not only that, we're also seeing demand not fall off a cliff, but kind of trending downward in the downward direction. And when demand falls and you got supply that's at an all-time high, that is available trucks to move freight, you're going to see the prices be affected. Okay, we're seeing trucks that before there was 200,000 carriers to choose from, for example, in the USA. We're seeing that number like closer to 400,000, right? So that's going to affect the price. We're going to unfortunately have to see that number come down to more realistic, sustainable amount of carriers, 230-ish thousand, 240-ish thousand carriers available for hire. That's more realistic. That's where we're going to see more realistic prices rather than seeing prices where we're seeing them right now, which is a very difficult to deal with. And shippers have options, right? Shippers have options, brokers have options. I'll give you an example: Toronto to Chicago. We should be saying two or three carriers battle it out to try to get that load, right? And for realistic prices, right? $4 a mile, 350, somewhere in that range, up to $5 a mile, depending on the urgency, of course. No, man, we're seeing like 12 to 15 trucks battle it out for one load out of Toronto going to Chicago, for example. Okay, that's a problem, right? That's a problem for the pricing, and add into that, people don't know how to price, right? Dispatchers maybe weren't taught properly how to price, or the owner, for whatever reason, doesn't understand pricing himself, or doesn't understand that he has to remain profitable in that respect. So that affects the fact that we get these dollar a mile rates from carriers that are taking these loads, and we get the mega carriers involved. When you add them into the mix, it's a free for all for everybody, right? And it's sad to see this happen to a lot of hardworking truckers that are trying to get by, right? And in addition to that, they have more pressures, right? They have pressures from the FMCSA, for example, with regulations that come in every year. Something new comes in every year. Something new they try to implement, and it affects the bottom line of the truck driver, okay, and the trucking company. So we see all of these pressures that are going, and then of course the geopolitical tensions, global issues that we're seeing now, that also affects companies' willingness to increase maybe the number of locations they have or the manufacturing processes they use. In addition to this, the demand itself, the fact that we're seeing less imports as well from China and other places, that's also affecting the rates. There's a guy out of South Carolina I know. He's got three trucks and three trailers that he moves containers around on, out of Charleston, and he's looking to sell. He's looking to get out of it, right? Because he says the rates are relatively unbearable. There's a couple guys out of Long Beach I know, same thing. Some guys out of Vancouver, British Columbia, same deal. Okay. So when people ask me who's to blame, I mean, it literally can be like that Spider-Man meme where like they're all pointing at each other, like everybody's to blame, right? There's a lot of blame to be thrown around. Okay. How do we get out of it? Please stop taking cheap freight. Please just stop. This is what happened in 2021. People stopped to take cheap freight. Okay. And in addition to that, capacity took a hit. I understand there was not enough trucks on the road, but that was also a little bit fabricated, because anytime I would post a load or send out to my email list, I would find an option, no problem. Okay. But guess what happened? trucking companies and truckers got smart about it. Okay, they got very intelligent about it. They say, you know what? We used to run this Ontario, California to El Paso, Texas for $1,800, for example. No, sir. You want me to run this? It's going to be 10 grand. It's going to be 8 grand. Now it's not sustainable, but where we have fallen from the all time highs is also unsustainable. Okay. Imagine we went from, and there was literally loads running for 40 plus $1,000 from Ontario, California to El Paso, Texas. I mean, we're talking like 700 and what is it, 770 miles or something like that. So we went from like up here, completely unsustainable rates right now. Like these are beyond rock bottom. This is like we've reached rock bottom. Now we're going to start digging to try to get even worse rates. No, just stop taking the cheap freight. Even if you just, and it's not about, oh, okay, no, I'm not going to take cheap freights and I don't know what that means. Sit down, look at your operational cost calculations. If you guys want, reach out to me. I will send you the operational cost calculator. You can do it yourself for your truck and realize that you shouldn't be taking Ontario to El Paso below whatever your operating costs are. And I assure you, it's not going to be $1 a mile. I guarantee you, it's not going to be $1 a mile freight. Okay. So it's a very difficult, as you can see, and I'm getting a little bit agitated and a little bit excited about this, but you can see that it's not so simple to answer. I can't just say, yes, it's brokers, 100% brokers. There's a lot of fantastic brokers out there that go to their shippers, say, you know what? You want me to put quality carriers on this, safe carriers, reliable carriers, sustainable carriers that can maybe become serviceable to you for decades. If you want me to do that, this is going to be the price. And those kind of brokers, those are the guys that are adding their 10% profits, their 15% profits. I don't give a if you add 30%, as long as you give the carriers, okay, what you need, what those carriers need to survive. They're not going to survive at $1 a mile. And that's what these big boys are doing, these C.H. Robinsons and the TQLs and the fucking, I'm not going to mention all the names out there, but essentially, okay, you're seeing this happen, and it's beyond frustrating to me. Okay, where we see these people go in that have no clue how to price things out. They have absolutely no clue whatsoever what it costs to run a truck down the road. And it could be a lack of education or a lack of guidance from the people they work with. So what, or the company that they work for, it could be a broker, for example. He got thrown into the fire or she got thrown into the fire and no clue how to price. And she thinks that if she takes a rate super low, okay, and underbid everybody so then she or he could get that load from the shipper, okay, they believe that they will be able to find then carriers. But if we then sift through that noise, okay, and stop taking that cheap freight, that's going to take those rates from like that rock bottom area to a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more sustainable, very sustainable, profitable. Okay. And we can get there. We've been in that cycle at least once since I started in this business in 2010. Realistically, even with my own trucks, I'm gonna say we've been in this about 4 times where prices were very much profitable. Okay. Even without us doing our calculations, but again, we still do our operational cost calculations. Okay. So if we've seen it before, history always repeats itself. So it's definitely doable again, but it has to start with you trucking companies out there and you carriers out there. If you do get to see this message, stop taking the cheap stuff. Okay, brokers, stop taking the cheap stuff and stop underbidding everybody. I have no problem. I don't care what you make as a broker. Okay, just do the pricing accordingly. Okay, accordingly. Okay, go to your carriers in the area where you have the freight. Talk to them. Don't price without talking to your carriers. Figure out where they need to be at. Okay, and take the super cheap price out of the equation. If you got that super cheap, just no, and take the super unrealistic guy that wants 100 grand to go from Chicago to Dallas. Take him out of the equation. Look at that median. Look at that realistic pricing. Okay, where it needs to be. and price accordingly off of that. Okay, and I promise you, we will get out of this from that respectively. Okay, if we don't take this approach in this manner, it's going to be very difficult for us to get out of this sooner rather than later. Okay, otherwise people are just going to keep taking cheap freight, and the cycle to flip this industry on its head, it doesn't take much. It takes 30,000 carriers. That's not a lot, guys. I'm telling you, that's not a lot. We're talking about the USA with 340 million people and Canada with 39 million people. Okay, 30,000 carriers isn't a lot. And it takes 30,000 of you to just say, stop. No, we are not taking cheap freight. And this is going to get the ball rolling down the hill, which is what we need. This is what we need to change the pricing that's happening right now. I mean, you guys tell me in the comments, you guys tell me if these prices are sustainable for the next decade. Are you going to be able to support your family and your truck and your equipment and properly maintain it and get your repairs done and pay the taxes to your government and pay your drivers and pay yourselves and your property taxes and your parking and your tires, everything else, that fuel, is it going to be sustainable? Okay, there's not going to be many of you that say yes. I can tell you that much. Okay. So again, back to the question that people ask, who is to blame? Let's just start pointing fingers at everybody, but please, the summary of all of these last 16 minutes is stop taking cheap freight. And we will get out of this sooner rather than later. And that is the overall message from that. Okay. So think about it. It's definitely something that you need to look at. Sit down with your company, with your drivers, or excuse me, with your own trucking company and figure out where you need to be on the rate and don't go below it. And we will see this ball get rolling. Okay. Just some food for thought, I guess.